Welcome to Learn City, guys. My name is Oloni Christopher. And starting from where we stopped in the last video, we'll be looking on the scientific method involved in chemistry. Now, you said when conducting a research, scientists use scientific method to collect empirical evidence from an experiment. Now, what makes an experiment scientific? What would make a particular subject scientific? It is because it is experimental. Now, when conducting a research, scientists use scientific methods to collect empirical evidence from an experiment. Yes, they use empirical methods means something that is legit, something that can be put into what? Into tables, something that we can get the facts from. So it is what? Empirical. So scientists use empirical methods, evidences from an experiment to collect information. Now, it means if you want to conduct a research, particularly on chemistry, you have to go out for a research, which is what? Experiment. From there, you get your ideas, you get your observations. Now, after getting your observations, you try to ask questions about them if they are true or false. Now, after asking questions, probably in your mind, you would come to a conclusion about what you've experimented on. Now, you write down a tentative statement to tell us what you've experimented about, which is called the hypothesis. It means hypothesis is the tentative statement about what you studied, what you've observed. Putting it down is what? Hypothesis. Now, after that, you make your conclusion about that particular hypothesis, if it is true or false. If that particular observation can be represented in more than 5 times or in multiple times, it will now be formed to become a theory. Now, after the hypothesis have been made, there will be a kind of conclusion to wrap everything you've observed about. Now, that conclusion must be gotten from 5 validable experiments. It means what you've experimented about must be practiced numerous times, giving us the same accurate answer. So that's when it is now concluded into a theory. So theory is the last aspect of an experiment. That's when you have James theory, Planck's theory, and other theories in any subject, particularly chemistry. Now, the next aspect we'll be moving in or looking into is the function of common laboratory equipment. Now, when we talk about chemistry, chemistry is something we can experiment. So anything we can experiment must require equipment to use. Now, when we talk about common laboratory equipment, these are the equipment used in a chemistry laboratory to find out things, to prove things, to validate things. Now, we have different equipment in the laboratory. We have the safety goggles in the laboratory, in the chemistry laboratory. Now, what is the function of the safety goggles? It is one, to prevent any source of accident within the eye, since chemicals could split and affect the eye. Now, what are we talking about? We wear safety goggles in the laboratory to prevent the eye from chemicals, because chemicals are hazardous and they can harm the eyes. We also have beakers. Beakers are used for mixing, stirring, and heating chemicals. It is a small glass tube which is used for what? For mixing, for stirring, and for heating chemicals. We also have the Erlenmeyer's flask. The Erlenmeyer's flask is also called the conical flask, which is named after the inventor Erlenmeyer. Now, it has a narrow neck which allows easy mixing of chemicals without stirring. It means it's used for stirring also, but it has a narrow neck which prevents chemicals from what? From splitting out of that particular tube. So it is better to use a conical flask to stir chemicals so that it won't spill out of that particular flask. Now, we also have test tubes. Test tube is a glass tube with an open end and a closed end used to hold small samples. We use test tube. It is a cylindrical glass tube which is used to what? To hold small samples of chemicals. It could also be used to heat chemicals because it is very small and it can be held very easily. We also have the pipette. Now, the pipette is used for measuring exact volume of liquid into another container. Probably when you want to perform an experiment and you have a container in which you want to particularly have some chemicals into it. Now, you need to measure the amount of chemicals that will be put into that particular container. You use your pipette because it has grades where you can measure and use it to what? To transfer your chemicals from one place to the other. Now, we also have pipette. Pipette is a glass tube that is opened at the top and comes to a narrow bottom opening. It is opened at the top and it comes to it a narrow bottom opening where chemicals are what? Comes out for titration. Now, it is used to what? To release chemicals for experiment. Now, we also have the beam balance. The beam balance is used for weighing chemicals. Chemicals like solids. For example, you want to perform an experiment using sodium. Sodium is a chemical that is a solid. So, a metal. We need to measure and weigh that particular chemical so as to get the accurate amount of what we need. So, it means beam balance is used for what? For weighing chemicals. So, we also have thermometer. Thermometer is used for measuring the temperature of liquids, especially chemicals in the laboratory. For example, if you want to perform an experiment on H2SO4, hydrogen tetrahydrosulfate 6, and you need the acid to be at a temperature of 60 degrees Celsius, you need to heat it on the fire. Now, after heating, you need to use your thermometer to look at the actual temperature so that it will be less or it will be hot too much. So, we also have volumetric flask. Volumetric flask is a round flask with a long neck and a flat bottom. It has what? A long neck and a flat bottom. It is also used for keeping chemicals. Chemicals are being kept there for future purposes because it is a reservoir where we can keep chemicals. So, this will be the end of discussion about functions of common laboratory equipment. Thank you.